Hi, everyone. Welcome to the sixth lesson in our emotional healing class. And I look forward to sharing with you some more information tonight that I hope will be very helpful for you in helping yourself and in helping other people. Now, I want to start off tonight by answering a question that someone put to me last week, because someone asked me about my theology in regards to the Bible. And I was just not a question I was prepared to go into. I did want to just say something about that really quickly. And here's where my take comes from. Some time ago, my son came home from college, David, who works with me, and he said, "Dad, which is more important for communication, common experience or common language?" And I said, "Common experience." And he said, "That's what I thought, but the teacher said it was common language." Well, I said, "Well, I think your teacher's wrong, because the only reason why, I need a button on my shirt, the only reason why common language works is because the symbols that are used in language represent common experience. So if we all, when I say the word apple, everybody's seen an apple. Most of you have probably eaten an apple. You have an experience of an apple, so you know what that symbol refers to. My Russian Ukrainian wife and her kids call apples yablikas, yabliki as the plural. They're still the same thing. They're still the same actual thing. It's just a different symbol used to represent it. And all words are in language is symbols used to represent ideas. So if you haven't had a common experience, how do you use symbols to represent that experience? And that's where the difficulty is in communicating things spiritually. If you've never eaten a dragon fruit, all right, then you have no experience of a dragon fruit and you don't know what I'm talking about. So I resort to a poetical device called simile and metaphor. I use things that you probably are familiar with to try to help you understand. Like a dragon fruit is a white flesh fruit with little black seeds. It's like a kiwi is, the inside of the flesh is like a kiwi, little black seeds in a kiwi, but that's got green flesh, and a dragon fruit has white flesh. It's a fruit maybe about this big, has little kind of spiky things, red on the outside, a little more bland, not quite as, little more bland and sweet than kiwi is. But see, still, all you have is an idea of a kiwi based on what it is. You don't, if I showed you a picture, that would help, but it still doesn't tell you what the kiwi tastes like. And so you have to have the experience. Well, when we talk about spiritual things, how do you describe a spiritual experience which takes place with nothing really in the physical world that you can compare it to, in words, to someone who's never had a spiritual experience? Well, you use symbolism, you use likenesses, use similes, use metaphors, you use storytelling. Robert Frost said a poetry should begin in delight and end in wisdom. The idea is that the story paints a picture of something in the physical world that we're all familiar with, a situation, and then relates it to something metaphysical, something beyond the physical, something that's spiritual. And so when I think of Scripture, I think of Scripture not as the words, the symbols that are in the book, but actually, what is it pointing to? What is the spiritual reality it's pointing to? And in fact, in the New Testament, there's this thing, in the beginning was the Word. Well, the word translated as word is the Greek word logos. And logos doesn't actually mean word in the way we use word. Logos means the idea that the word is trying to convey. And that idea that God wanted to convey to mankind it says in that passage, was made flesh and dwelt among us, i.e. Jesus Christ. So in my viewpoint, Jesus is the Word, okay? And Scripture is only to point the way to having an experience with Him. If you haven't had the experience, you're missing the whole point. That makes sense to me, because once you start having experiences, all of a sudden things in Scripture come alive. They have meaning because you can relate to them. An analogy I've used to describe this is if you had read all of the books that were ever written on the Grand Canyon, but you had never visited the Grand Canyon, you would have an idea about the Grand Canyon that had formed in your head from reading other people's descriptions of it. But you never would have personally experienced the Grand Canyon. You wouldn't know the Grand Canyon. You'd only know about the Grand Canyon. And so I think a lot of people think that because they've studied scriptures or whatever, they know God, but they only know about God if they have never really developed a personal experience or relationship with Him. And that's how I wanted to answer that question. Jesus said to the scribes and Pharisees who were experts in the law and the scriptures, He said, you search the scriptures, for in them, the scriptures, you think you have eternal life, but they are they which testify of me, and you won't come to me that you might have life. So that's my answer to that question that was placed last week, which leads into tonight, because when Moses had an encounter with God in the burning bush, and he asked, who shall I say sent me? He says, well, say, I am sent you. And he says, I am that I am. And that actually is where we're going to get into a little bit of tonight's presentation. I do have a few slides for tonight. So let's, get started. I'm going to show you a couple of slides. I want to just remind you of this particular thing that we've shown before, which is the idea that we're the temple of God, that we have a physical body, we have an emotional being inside of that, and a mental or maybe spiritual body. And I'm not hung up on the words. The words are symbols of the ideas. So whatever words suit you, you substitute whatever words you want. It doesn't bother me. I'm only trying to illustrate a concept that if we are the temple of God, then God dwells inside of us. And you also used this model before, where I talked about our real self, our innermost true self, and then this self that has all of these weaknesses and strengths, these struggles, that we look down inside and we're kind of afraid of, and that we're trying to run away from, and we're trying to project a public self to make ourselves acceptable for the world. And based on that, I want to get into something that I was taught many years ago. I attended this workshop taught by this Polynesian lady, and it was a really fascinating workshop. And she was talking about the power of words and the power of language, and the power of beliefs. And she told some really interesting stories. She said, for example, there was a girl who had bought this T-shirt, and it had Chinese writing on it. And every time she wore it, she felt sick to her stomach. And she actually went to someone who spoke Chinese and said, what is on this shirt? And he looked at it. He just looked at it like this, and he flipped it over, and he says, that's disgusting. I won't translate that. But he says she didn't, her physical being didn't know what those words were, but there's an energy to that. There's an energy to symbols, the energy that goes into those symbols. So when I talk about the reality, we're talking about being, and words are symbols of being. And what this lady said is, number one, when God said, my name is I am, she says you shouldn't be putting anything negative after God's name. So you shouldn't ever put anything negative after I am. And I thought that was really interesting. But she also put it in a different way. The trouble with is that is, she said. So I'll say it again. The trouble with is that is. And I remember that I kind of got that concept that whatever we put after I am, we tend to act out. And when we tell someone else, you are something, and they believe us, they begin to act that way. I already had, learned a lot about parenting, and I understood that in our culture, we often say to kids when they're doing something we disapprove of, we say, you're being a bad boy, or you're being a bad girl, or you are a bad boy, or you are a bad girl, or when they're doing something we like, we say you're a good girl, or you're a good boy. In other words, we label the person's being according to their actions. In other words, we say that their actions and their being are one of the same. Well, the problem with that is that just because you did something once or even 2 or 3 times that was maybe not the smartest thing to do and maybe not even a good thing to do, like maybe you stole something or you lied or whatever, it doesn't make you bad. It just means that you did something that wasn't good, that was bad, okay? And there's a big difference between those two things. Because if you fundamentally believe that you're good and you recognize that, hey, I did something that's bad, then you don't want to do it anymore. You'll change. But if you do something bad and you fundamentally believe you are bad, why change? Because it's your nature, it's your being, it's your nature to be that way. You tell kids that they're naughty and they become naughty. You tell kids that they're bad and they become bad. If they believe it, if you say you are bad, you are dumb, you are stupid, you are clumsy, you are whatever, and the child believes it, okay, then that becomes part of the child's I am, and that moves into their subconscious mind. And as we started off on the very first lesson that I taught in this whole course, what you put as belief in your subconscious mind attached powerfully to emotions becomes a filter on reality. I told the story of how I recognized that because I believed that my mom didn't love me and that therefore no woman could love me, I was attracted to women who didn't love me. Okay, because it was the only reality I knew, and I couldn't see anything differently until I had that emotional healing experience, and I realized that belief was false, and that allowed the belief to change. All right, and so what I'm trying to say is, what she taught me that day was you have to be very, very careful of what you do with the to be verb, because the to be verb is the power to create. It's the power to bring into being. If you're constantly telling yourself, I am sick, I am dumb, I am whatever, that is the way you will be. And if you're constantly looking at your spouse or your child and you're thinking, you're selfish, you're this, you're that, you are blah, 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 you will make them that way in your mind. You will only see that part of them because you have in your mind created a belief system that they exist in the state of being lazy, whatever. And how can anyone change? Or even if they do change, how would you even notice that they changed if you have such a belief system? I can't tell you how many times I've done emotional healing work with people and have seen dramatic change. Then they go back into their family environment with their friends and nobody can see it. Why? Because all of those people have already labeled them as crazy or angry or sad or whatever. And in their minds, that's the way they are and they can't change. Because the trouble with is. That is. Whatever is. It exists. So you have to be very careful in the way you deal with this. And I've even come to realize it's more than that. It's really a creative power. It's evoking. It's part of the creative power God gave us to evoke things into being. And there's this very interesting little book written on that I Actually, I've forgotten the title right now, but all I'm saying is that you need to seriously consider what you put after the words I am with yourself and you are with the people around you. And they are with other groups of people. Because those labels become judgments, and those judgments become your reality, if you're following what I'm saying. So this leads into the basic focus of tonight. And tonight, I'm actually the first time I'm going to give a very pragmatic, practical tool that I learned for emotional healing that has probably become my primary go-to tool for just basic emotional healing. And it works off the principle that I just said. It works off the idea that your inner beliefs control your experience. They control your perception. They control what you're capable of seeing and perceiving and choosing. And this was taught to me by a chiropractor on the south coast of Australia. And I didn't fully understand what he was trying to tell me the first time he did it. I'm going to just temporarily come back to the camera, and I'm going to kind of tell you the story. And then I'll come back and explain what he said. He told me that he had an emotional healing technique that he was a chiropractor. He had an emotional healing technique that he used with muscle response testing. And he wanted to demonstrate it with me. So what he did is he would find a statement using muscle response testing, which is, you're pressing on a muscle, like having a person hold their arm out like this, and you're pressing to have them hold their arm up. He would find a statement that was a positive statement that they muscle tested weak on. Now, what that means is if I put my arm up like this and someone pushes on my arm and I say, my name is Stephen Horne, I will test strong. If I say, my name is Susan Ann, my arm will go weak. Because when I say something that I don't believe is true, there's a temporary weakness that creates. In other words, every time you are untruthful, there's a little bit of weakness in your body because you're not in alignment with, you're not in internal alignment. Okay. So when you say something that you don't believe is true, muscle test weak. So he found this statement. And this, by the way, I don't remember, this was very close around the time I had my emotional healing experience with Mary and Lyle. I think it was a little before or a little bit after. I'm not sure which. But he said, say, I have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women. And I said, I couldn't even say that. I was so weak. He says, now let's turn that into a question. What would it feel like to have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women? Now, I remember this very well. I was sitting on the south coast of Australia. I was lounged back in a chair like this. And I remember going, what would it feel like to have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women? And I'm going to show exactly what happened to me. What would it feel like to have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women? What would it feel like to have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women? And I swear, I wound up, my body instinctively started to sit up straight. My shoulders went back, and I started to get this really strong, powerful, self-confident feeling flowing through my brain. Wow, this feels really good. And then he said, oh, now say it. I have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women. I said, I have massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women. I tested strong. I didn't fully understand why that worked, but I can tell you it did work. It was a major change in my life, because the very next class I went to, I had people who'd known me for a while said, "What's changed about you? You look differently. You look like you're taller or something." Well, my shoulders actually, the way I held my shoulders had changed. The way I stood up had changed. Something inside me had flipped. Okay, and that's what happens with emotional healing. Some internal belief system had changed. So going back to the slide presentation, I want to explain when I had a chance to meet with him again, what he helped me understand of why this works. What he said is that we're naturally disposed, that God created us to be good. It says when God created everything, as he created each thing in the there's actually two creation stories in the Bible. The first one, which talks about God creating day and night, light and darkness, all the plants and then the animals and so forth. And after he creates each thing, he says it's good. He saw that what he created was good. And then he creates men and women, male and female, mankind. And he says it's very good. And I read that a pretty good Hebrew translation for that term that we see in the Bible, very good, is excellent in every way. In other words, practically perfect. All right? Mary Poppins, if you will. Well, if God created us to be good, then our natural inclination, because we're his children, is to be good. We're naturally disposed to want to do what's right, to want to live in the light, to want to know the truth, to want to have pleasure, to want to have peace of mind, to want to be happy. And at the same time, we're naturally disposed to shun the darkness, to shun falsehood, to shun pain, to shun stress, and shun suffering. We don't want that. So the question becomes, if that's the way we're created, if that's the way we're hardwired, if that's like the wiring inside the computer of our body and our brain, then why do we do bad things? And the answer simply is that we somehow have to get deceived. Now, let me also just back up here a little bit. That there's a natural consequence to everything that we do. And I've talked about this before. You touch something hot, you get burned. You aren't careful with a knife, you cut yourself. You aren't watching where you're going, you stub your toe. The pain teaches you to not do that anymore, right? The same thing's true. Would you eat if it wasn't pleasurable? I mean, people who lose their sense of taste and smell and eating isn't pleasurable have a hard time eating. They don't want to eat. What's the point of eating? It's the pleasure of eating that makes us want to eat, to nourish our bodies. It's the satiation when we're thirsty that the water makes us feel good. It makes us want to drink. In other words, we're built to be able to naturally, inside of ourselves, recognize when something is good for us and when something is not good for us, when something is true and it's false. We have an innate ability built into us. We were created that way. So what has to happen is something has to come along and deceive us, because we can make mistakes, but we'll automatically, correct them. I mean, this is one of the things I learned about parenting. As much as possible, you let your children experience the natural consequences of their behavior, and they'll pretty much figure out what works and what doesn't, because they're really smart. And where you can't use natural consequences, you use logical consequences. But that's basically the way the whole thing works. So what happens here, okay, is that what I call dragons come into us. Call them serpents, demons, whatever you want to call them. I don't care. Pick your own label. I like the term dragon. It has kind of a nice symbolic nature to it. Dragons are illusions. Dragons are your false beliefs. Dragons are things that your subconscious mind believes to be true that aren't. And those lies that you've come to believe, that you've come to put faith in, that you've adopted as part of your subconscious mind cause you to think that light is darkness and darkness is light, to think that good is evil and evil is good, they distort your perception. So you're unable to see reality for what it is. They, as I've explained before, filter your perception of what is real. Now, dragons can't exist in the light. They can only exist in darkness. What I mean by darkness is they have to exist in your subconscious mind where you are not examining them or confronting them. Because if you examined or confronted them, you would pretty rapidly figure out that they're stupid. But because they're down inside you in places that you don't want to look at, because there's a lot of emotional pain associated with that dragon, you don't want to confront it. So you run away from it. But it continues to influence your behavior and your choices, even though you're not aware of it, because it's just become kind of part of your background belief system. And when you bring a dragon into the light of awareness, when you actually confront it and see it, it disappears. It loses all of its power over you. So a story that I found early on that illustrates the idea of dragons very well, and it was, I did hear it as someone who was a natural health therapist tell this story, and I don't know if I have all the details right, but I have the basic idea of the story, and I've encountered plenty of others just like it. He was trying to help a young woman in her 20s to lose weight. And she would maybe lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. And then she would suddenly go out on a binge, eat a bunch of junk food, and gain all that weight back and maybe sometimes more. So in trying to help her, he started to, question her experience, whatever. He found out that she started to gain weight when she was about 6 years old. And what he learned is that just prior to this, about the age of 5, an uncle, I think it was an uncle, had tried to sexually molest her. Now, in this case, he hadn't actually succeeded. I didn't get the whole story, but he had tried to sexually molest her. He'd gotten caught. Everybody in the family was very upset. Her mother in particular was extremely upset. So there's all this emotional trauma and pain and upset around her, right? And she's scared and nervous and blah, 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 and all this emotion is coursing through her. And her mom blurted out, "It's a shame she's not fat, because fat girls don't get molested." Enter the dragon. The girl believed what her mother said. Not consciously, she just absorbed the belief. And that went into her subconscious that in order for me to avoid this pain and suffering, in order for me to be happy, in order for me not to be hurt or whatever, I have to be overweight. And immediately, the natural instinct of her being says, being sexually molested is bad. Therefore, it must be good to be fat because it will avoid this bad thing from happening. That's a dragon. That's the nature of dragons, and that is what we're doing in emotional healing. Is we're becoming dragon slayers. We're helping bring people's dragons into the light, so they can be seen for what they are and can be healed. Because until you recognize the dragon continues to pervert your perception of what is real and what is not real. So this is what the dragon does. Here we have an illusion here, not a reality of happiness and pleasure and joy and light. We have an illusion of that. Something we've been taught, this will create pleasure, happiness, light. And so we're pursuing this, but what it's really happening is it's giving us pain and suffering, and it's not true at all. But the dragon has clouded our mind and clouded our perception, so we think that this thing that we're doing, which is good, is really not good. But we're in denial. And this is why emotions are important. Emotions will always tell you the truth. They're always true. The thoughts that you have about your emotions are usually false, but the emotions themselves are true. The emotion that you're experiencing, the quote unquote negative emotion, is saying, this is not working. This is not making me happy. This is not bringing me pleasure. This is not making me healthy. This is not giving me great relationships. This is not helping me to be prosperous. This is not helping me to have a good, wonderful, happy, beautiful life. But we're in denial because we've been taught to deny our emotions, that the fact that we're doing this thing and it's making us miserable is our fault. It's not the fault of what we're doing. It's our fault. There's something wrong with us, not something wrong with what we're doing. Do you follow that? We've come to internalize there's something wrong with us, not something wrong with the behaviors we're pursuing. Because if we could recognize it was the behaviors, it's the belief systems that are driving our behaviors that were false, we would change our behavior and the suffering would stop. But instead, we've been convinced that if we did the good thing, the thing that would help us to be prosperous, the thing that would help us have good relationships, the thing that would help us to be happy, the thing that would help us to have peace of mind, the thing that would bring good things into our life, we're totally convinced if we did that, that would create misery and suffering. And so we're running away from it because inside, in our deepest core being, we want to be good and we don't want to do what's wrong. That's how dragons work. Capiche? Understand? Make sense? This is what we're up against. All right? This is why you can't cure darkness with darkness. Here's this person, okay, who's doing the wrong thing because deep down inside they want to be good, okay? And you're telling them that what they're doing is wrong, and they're going to start to defend it because you're trying to stop them from doing what's right and make them do what's wrong. And they'll fight you. So shame, fear, guilt, and blame instill these things. They don't get rid of them. All right. You have the power of discernment. This is one of the primary things that I'm trying to do with people, is I'm trying to get them to reclaim their own power of discernment, to believe in their own inner goodness, in their own inner ability to perceive what's right and wrong, what's good and evil. So there's this passage in Isaiah that puts this very nicely. It says, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And I see this as a mind, a mental, emotional, physical discernment of truth. We naturally want to be in the light, and unless you're doing things that you know you're not supposed to be, and then you want to hide it under cover of darkness. Falsehood likes to live in darkness. Truth lives in the light. You can tell whether something is enlightening or not. You know, sometimes when I'm teaching some of this stuff, people are like, I've never heard this before. It makes absolute perfect sense. Something inside their soul just resonates with it. They see it. It's plain. Truth is plain. Truth makes sense. Truth is logical. Truth is clear. Truth is not muddy, mystical. All of the people who want to give you all this confusing, difficult to understand, complicated information so that they can set themselves up as the experts and the guru and see how fantastic I am, and you have to come to me because you're not smart enough to understand this for yourself. That's an immediate sign to me that there's something wrong here. There's something really wrong here when people say, you have to have us fix this for you. I don't believe it. There's something wrong. It repulses me. You know, goodness produces happiness. Evil produces suffering. When you do what's right, you have a happiness and peace inside. When you do what's wrong, you don't. You feel guilty, you feel ashamed, blah, blah. Then what you do is, like I said, we project our guilt and our shame on other people in blame. All right. But if people who are happy like to make other people happy, people who are in pain want to make other people in pain. All right. So if you learn how to find the goodness inside of you that makes you happy, you're going to want to make other people happy. Naturally. If you continue to put up with stuff that's making you suffer, you won't want to make other people happy. You'll instead think that they owe things to you to try to make you happy, which doesn't work. And that which is good for the body is sweet, meaning not sugary, but sweet as in pleasant. Eating is pleasant. Overeating is not pleasant. Overeating hurts the stomach. People think eating junk food is pleasant, or maybe drinking alcohol is pleasant, but what I find is they're not. They're actually, people do eat junk food and drink alcohol and take drugs and everything, not because it's pleasurable, because it's pain numbing. When people are in a lot of pain inside, they'll do things that numb their pain, that dull their sensibilities, that dull their ability to feel. I don't like to eat all that stuff because I find that it dulls my ability to feel. And I like to feel. I like to be able to feel good things. But if you feel good things, you're also going to notice the painful things. I remember reading this little thing where this guy told a natural practitioner, I'm not going to give up my junk food. He says, well, then just do me a favor. Sit down, eat your hamburgers and your French fries and everything slowly, chew each bite, and really savor and enjoy what you're eating. And he came back 2 weeks later and said, I don't want to eat that junk. All too often, we're living in denial. We have this idea in our brain that this is good, but if we really tuned into the body, we would find it's not good. It's not pleasurable. Okay? It's not good. Feeling unhealthy is not pleasurable, right? Being depressed and sick and whatever is not pleasurable. And people tend to pig out on junk food when they don't feel good about themselves, not when they do feel good about themselves. And this is another passage from Isaiah that also conveys this similar idea that awareness is the place of healing. It says, make the heart of this people fat, make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with ears and understand with their heart and be converted and be healed. Our goal is to help people hear with their ears, see with their eyes, and understand in their heart. And that's where the healing comes, because they actually get in touch with the fact that this thing they're doing is downright miserable and painful. It's making them sad. It's making them angry. It's making them unhappy. It's making them depressed. It's making them afraid. It's causing them anxiety, and so on and so forth. And once you can connect that some belief that you have is creating those kinds of negative feelings in you, and you can see that there is another belief system that you can adopt, another line of behavior and reasoning you can adopt that is going to instead bring you joy and happiness and peace of mind, I guarantee your subconscious mind will immediately reorient on the goal. And when I understood this, that's when I understood what my dragon was. I've grown up in a culture, and it's worse now than it was back then, that just constantly belittles manhood and masculinity as if masculinity is something toxic, evil, and negative. And I had absorbed those belief systems inside of myself and was almost kind of ashamed of masculinity. And I didn't want to be the macho jerk and whatever. But when I asked what would it feel like to have this massive masculine energy, I didn't feel like abusing anyone. I didn't feel like hurting anybody. In fact, I felt I was much better able to take care of other people, to protect other people, to do good things in the world. I realized subconscious shift its goal, and I realized masculinity wasn't bad. Masculinity is very good. And I wasn't afraid of being masculine anymore. Now, that was the first step on the healing. These things come off in layers. I've had to work on the layers of that many times, but But that's the kind of thing that happens with dragons. You adopt the belief system, and it keeps you from doing something that is really actually quite beneficial. So back to our chat. So yeah, these dragons control our thoughts. In other words, in order for you to stop living in the love of God, someone has to deceive you. The dragon, the serpent, whatever, has to deceive you into judging that something's wrong with you. You got it? And get you no longer to trust your own natural, God-given internal sense of right and wrong, and instead surrender it to an external thing where somebody else takes control, and basically through a system of rewards and punishments, they artificially create the same thing. So let's take some really just absolute practical examples. I work with people, because you think that people only suppress negative emotions. People suppress all kinds of emotions, including happiness and peace of mind and so forth. But let's say you grow up in a family with a parent who criticizes you and punishes you when you're laughing. Stop laughing, you're making too much noise, blah, 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 and they spank you, okay? So laughter then becomes acquainted with the subconscious mind with pain. There must be something wrong with me having a good time, because mom is nicer to me when I'm quiet and I don't laugh and I'm serious, right? And therefore, I get set up inside of me, the dragon, that laughter would be, bad. It's going to cause pain. It's going to cause suffering. And by the way, the reason why this happens is because when you suppress emotions, you armor your body. You create tension in your body that prevents you from accessing those areas of your body that express that feeling. And so since emotions are contagious forms of energy, a parent who can't deal with their own emotions, who has a lot of emotional wounds, when their children are being emotional, can't handle it, because the resonance of the emotion, whether it's laughter or sadness or anger or fear, hits that anger, sadness, fear, laughter, whatever inside of them that they are ashamed of and they don't know how to deal with. And it wakes it up in them, and they can't handle it. So they've got to shut down that child because they can't handle their own emotions. How can they help their children? And like I said, this is something, when I started to become aware of this, this awareness happened to me within the first year of me doing emotional healing. I started to grasp this concept. Wow, who doesn't need emotional healing? Who in our culture has grown up in an environment of just loving acceptance for who you are? Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Dragons are the limiting belief that is in reality not true. They are an illusion that things are that makes things appear to be something they are not. And the only way to get through them and recognize them for what they are is to start becoming emotionally true, to where you can realize that belief is causing you pain. Where that belief is causing you pain. And when you realize it's causing you pain, and then you search around and you find the belief that brings you joy, there is an instantaneous healing that takes place. The emotional healing actually takes place in a split second. It's just getting there that takes a while sometimes. But once you see through the illusion, you see the truth. And once you see the truth and you see the reality, it's much more powerful than the illusions you were under before. And You wake up and your whole being changes and reorients towards what's right. Now, so the dragon slayer that I was taught on the south coast of Australia is that you turn the dragon into a question. You turn the false belief into a question. Because here's the problem. I believe very strongly in affirmations and positive thinking. I believe very strongly in being able to, change your thoughts and put positive thoughts in your mind. So the problem I learned with doing just positive thinking, because I have done positive thinking. I have looked at belief systems I had and directly changed them just by directly changing my thoughts. But dragons make certain things difficult. And the reason they make them difficult is because let's just suppose that you are that young 20-year-old woman who's trying to lose weight, and you have the dragon inside of you that losing weight is going to get you sexually molested. If I start affirming, I am thin, healthy, and beautiful, all kinds of very negative emotions are going to come up from the surface. All that fear and confusion and pain and whatever that was associated with almost being molested is going to come roaring to the surface, and the dragon is going to say, how dare you lose weight? Don't you understand the danger you're going to put yourself in? Don't you understand how bad that is? And you're going to just go, I can't do that. I can't do that. Okay. This is the great secret I learned. So I really believe, like I said, in positive mental attitude. I really believe in telling yourself, I am good. I am healthy. I am prosperous. I am everything. You are beautiful. You're wonderful. You're good. You're intelligent. You're smart. You blah, blah, blah. I don't believe in telling other people that they're bad. I believe in that you could try to point out that your behavior isn't working. Okay. But that doesn't make the person bad. It's just, there are dragons. There are false belief systems, perverting their goodness. So what you do is you turn it into question. What would it feel like to be thin and beautiful? What would it feel like to be whatever? What would it feel like? So you find the negative statement, like me. What would it feel like to be filled with massive masculine strength and confidence in the presence of women? What would that feel like? Now, in my experience, what typically happens is that forces the dragon to surface, meaning the person will start to have uncomfortable emotions come up. And if you then encourage them to be present with those uncomfortable emotions, to breathe with them, to feel them, and emotions are something that happen in your body. So it's not a thought. They'll try to say things from their head, but that doesn't work. When a person tells you they feel something, say, where do you feel it? And if they go, what? You say, where in your body do you feel that? And if they don't know what they're talking about, they're not feeling a feeling. They're thinking a thought. You follow? If it's a feeling, it's a sensation in the body. This is very, very important. So that negative feeling, whatever it comes up, is anger or grief or whatever, you encourage them to be present with the feeling, to breathe with it, to let it be. And they will move through that feeling if they just are willing to be present with it. And then on the other side of that feeling, you get them to continue to ask the question, what would it feel like? And suddenly positive change will start to take place. They might feel more relaxed. Their shoulders might relax. Their knot in their stomach might go away and be replaced by a sense of relaxation and so forth. And so once they have a good feeling associated with the idea that what would it feel like to whatever, and a good feeling takes place, then you can say, do you want this good feeling? Are you ready to have this good feeling? And they say, yeah. And you say, then all you have to do is claim it. And then you have them make the positive affirmation. And I usually have them make it 3 times. Okay. I'm thin and beautiful. I'm thin and beautiful. I'm thin and beautiful, whatever. And then I muscle test them. If they test strong, then basically we've made a major inroad to the dragon. Now, of course, they should continue to state the positive affirmation. There are mental ruts we get into, where we tend to fall into thinking patterns, and it's possible you can start to fall back into negative thinking patterns. So you still have to do the positive thinking aspect of it. But at that point, the positive thinking aspect of it will work. So someone asked me, when a dragon is gone, is it gone forever? It is, except for the fact that there's layers of them. And so basically, it's like peeling off the layer of an onion. The first layer is gone. Then you'll find there's a layer underneath that you need to peel off until you get down to the core. And sometimes that takes a while to do that. I mean, there are some emotional issues in me I've worked on for like 2 years before I really totally got rid of them. And that's of course working with it on my own. When you're able to work with somebody, it actually goes faster. But I've done work just working through some things just on my own. So this little technique is, like I say, it's one of many, many tools that I employ, but it illustrates one of the core tools. What would it feel like if? In other words, what does this feel like, and what would it feel like if? And I've actually done this with people who are trying to make tough decisions in their life. They're caught in this difficulty, and they don't know what to do, and so forth. So I'll sit there and I'll tell them, okay, take a deep breath. Okay, what's one course of action you can take? And I say, all right. They tell me that course of action. So now picture yourself doing that. Imagine that you're doing this thing you just said. Just picture yourself doing it. And after they picture it for a minute, I say, and how does that feel? And they go, oh, I feel horrible. It's da, 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 da. Okay, so all right, so let's try a different one. What's another course of action you could take? And they'll go, okay, this. Well, maybe that one feels bad too. All right, well, then can you think of another course of action? Is there a third thing that you haven't considered that you could do? And I can guarantee that when the person finds the course of action that is right, a feeling of peace will come over them, and they will feel this sense of peace and love inside. And I say, well, there's your answer. The course of action you always want to take is the course of action that comes from a place of peace and love. Your emotions are always telling you the truth. When you feel peace and love, you are abiding in the right frequency. You're tuning in to the love of your Heavenly Father, the Creator, who loves you unconditionally, who wants the best for you, and who knows the best for you. When you're not doing that, then somehow your behavior, your choices, your whatever are bringing you pain. You are, in effect, touching something hot or cutting yourself or doing some other thing to hurt yourself, and you're in denial that it's causing you pain because you've been convinced that you have to do this because it's the right thing to do. But I'm telling you, it's not the right thing to do. Okay? It's not the right thing to do. Now, I want to make one caveat on that. Okay? To understand, we have the ability to override our instincts for self-protection and our pleasure pain mechanisms, for example, for a higher good. So, for example, someone who runs into a burning building to save somebody, and faces the pain and whatever in order to rescue somebody, is doing something from a place of love, from a good place in their heart. And even though they experience physical pain, they will have a peace that they knew they did the right thing. Whereas someone who didn't, might feel guilty, right? Because they didn't feel like they did the right thing. So what I'm saying is that we can override the fact that we can override these mechanisms in order to achieve a higher purpose, okay, is why we're capable of suppressing how we feel about things, and keep trying to do something that's causing us pain and avoid doing something that's would cause us good, because we believe that we're doing the right thing. Someone says, my ex-husband was angry and abusive. I went through a period of calling those things that are not as though they were, trying to speak self-control and patience and love into the situation. He got more and more abusive because he thought he was fine because I said he was. The state got involved. I am healing, but whilst I hear what you are saying, sometimes it backfires. Okay. All right. When we get into the next course to talk about dealing with anger, the thing that I absolutely need to make very, very clear is you have to see the goodness in the person, but you cannot condone bad behavior. All right? You can't say that bad behavior is good. We still have to confront bad behavior sometimes. We still have to stand up to abuse and so forth. But you can do so from a place of internal peace, knowing that you're doing what's in the best interest of you and also the other person, is what I'm trying to say. You can't, okay, when I say being careful about saying things in the way the other people are, mostly I'm talking about when we're dealing with children, because they're so impressionable. But once a person has already adopted beliefs and so forth internally and is behaving in a certain way, our belief in them may not be powerful enough to override it. Okay? So like I said, you have to separate behavior and the person. You always have to believe that inside is the person who's the child of God, who's good, but you have to recognize that they may be involved in dangerous, negative, self-destructing behavior that you may have to deal with. And that's where learning how to have a good relationship with anger comes in. We're not going to get into that in this course. The second course that I'm teaching on this, that will start when this one ends, the tools for healing, I'm going to talk about the different emotions, and I'm going to talk about what they mean and what I've learned about what they mean and how you work through them. And anger is the first one I deal with, because it's such a big and important one. Your body and your soul know the truth over your brain. Your brain is full of all kinds of programming, okay? But your body tells you the truth. And your heart tells you the truth. You can't have physical health if you abuse your body. Your body will rebel. Your body will fight back. It'll give you pain. It'll give you suffering. You'll get sick, and it's telling you, stop mistreating me. You need to change what you're doing. Your heart does the same thing. You will feel miserable, unhappy, be angry, be sad, be depressed, be whatever, as long as you are pursuing incorrect goals based on false belief systems. Once you change those things, you become happier. And little by little, as you root those things out of your being and you come to know the truth sets you free. And you have happiness. You have happiness that no one can take away from you. Like I said, what I've learned is that when something brings you a peace in your soul, brings love for you and love for your fellow man, when it has this light that accompanies it, that's God talking. when it brings confusion, when it makes your brain run around in circles, when you can't sort something out, when you can't, when it feels uncomfortable and you're worried and you're distressed and you're upset and everything, you're not on track. You're not on track. And one of the things that I found, and the reason why I mentioned about the thing with the abusive person is because I used to think that being, nice was the solution to everything. And now I understand that there are appropriate places for anger. Okay. But it's anger towards behavior, not anger towards people. You don't condemn the person. You just simply refuse to tolerate the behavior. So I hope that kind of helps to explain that a little better. All right. We've come to the end of our thing. I just want, I hope this has given you a little bit more of a practical application of what I've been getting up to. That we're starting to see how this actually can be put into effect. You find something, and here's what I would challenge you to do. Find something that you believe about yourself that's negative. Something. How do you tell the difference between, oh, that's a great question. How do you tell the difference between what your brain is telling you and what your heart is telling you? Very simple. Your brain is thoughts. All right? It's words and images that run around in your brain. All right? Pictures and the verbal diarrhea, okay? When you have a feeling, which is from your heart, it is a bodily sensation. It is not in your head. This is a very, very important differentiation to make going forward with emotional healing. People are so out of touch with their emotions, they literally do not know how they feel. They do not know because they have suppressed their feelings so much, and they're in such a habit of suppressing them that they don't know what they're feeling. They can't correctly identify emotions. And this is extremely true of teenagers now who are spending so much time on cell phones and whatever and not interacting with other people. They have a hard time identifying emotions. But an emotion is always a bodily sensation. It is always something that is taking place inside of your body. You'll feel it somewhere. You'll feel it here, you'll feel it here, you'll feel it down in your gut, you'll feel it somewhere in your body. And when that peace comes over you, it's a sensation through your entire body. When that love comes through you, it's a sensation through your entire body. It's not just an idea in your head. Someone said, I found that it helps so much to imagine myself sit down in my spirit in the lap of my maker to get a correct perspective on myself. That's a nice little exercise. But yeah, when I spoke last week about prayer and meditation, one of the things that I really tried to stress is that when you ask for help, you calm your mind down and you look for the feeling of peace and the little voice that speaks with peace and love to you, and pay attention to it. And you'll start to get guidance. And as you get guidance, you'll actually be guided the correct way to approach different problems. And it won't always be what other people around you think is right. Just a little warning. There are people around you who are going to say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You blah, 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 blah. You're blah, 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 blah. So everybody thinks they have the right to control everybody else's behavior and tell them what to do. I don't. You know what's best for you. I know what's best for me. I have a purpose God created me for. You have a purpose God created you for. And your purpose is not my purpose. I gave the analogy at the IPA conference, which I'm also going to bring up in this seminar I'm doing for IPA starting this week, the International Iridology Practitioners Association, which is that I just got distracted by looking at one of the comments. I was talking in that presentation about our soul and about our body. Okay, our body starts out as one cell, and as it differentiates, grows and grows and grows, cells specialize. So some cells become brain cells, some cells become blood cells, some cells become blah 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 blah, and they're all different. They all grew from the same root, but they're all different, and they all exist as a whole, not as individuals anymore. Your body is a colony, a community that's all one. Mankind is the same way. Okay? Mankind is the same way. We're all different. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. We all have our things that we can contribute to each other. And we have to learn to become united in love and let each of us contribute our gifts to the whole, and then the whole is nourished and so forth. The enemy wants to split us apart. He wants the body to be sick. He wants the parts of the body, the body of humanity, to be fighting with each other, to hating each other, judging each other, whatever, so that they're not able to use their gifts and talents to help each other. What God wants is for each of us to be able to use our unique gifts that he gave us to benefit the whole of mankind and receive in return what we need from the whole. Oh, someone said, I'm just going to read a couple of comments. I have many examples where I did what I was at peace with, guided by the Spirit, and it didn't make sense to others, but now looking back, it brought me immense joy and peace. Absolutely. The same thing has happened to me. You stay in the feeling of peace by continually seeking it, by continually going after it, by realizing that every time I'm emotionally upset, I've departed from the path. I'm not on the right path anymore, and I got to find my way back to that path. And the more you keep doing that, the more you start to stay on it longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and so forth. Oh, someone wants to translate the seminar in Greek. Okay, I'll look for your email then. And the ABC+D program, I don't know. I'll have to look at the links on the website and see what's going on. If you go to treelight.com, all of our courses right now are up at treelight.com, TREELITE.com. Yeah, that's why Jesus stressed unity as he prayed before he ascended in heaven. We are supposed to be one. We are supposed to be known by the fact that we love each other. Yes, and being still helps you learn peace. Helps you learn to quiet yourself down and move into the peace and joy of your Maker and not let the world keep you in turmoil. Meditating is quieting your mind. Quieting your mind. Shutting off the relentless chatter and getting calm. And when you're calm, and so if you go into that prayerfully, saying, God, this is what I need, this is the thing I'm struggling with, then you calm down. In that calmness, God can communicate with you. The bodily sensations of anxiety and tension tell you that there's something that you need to heal inside. And as you learn to work through that, your body will tell you when you're on the right track because it will relax and the anxiety will subside. All right? Okay, everyone. Went a little over again today, but thanks. By the way, it's not your thoughts that cause it, it's the beliefs. And the beliefs are things that you're not necessarily aware of. The emotional healing workshops. I did send out an email about this, and some of you may not have got it, but the emotional healing workshops, the 3-day emotional healing workshop, I've got 5 students. There's room for 5 more. It's here in St. George in May. I will probably do another one in the fall. All of you who have been attending these sessions and are continuing to attend these sessions are eligible to attend one of the workshops. They do cost money because I have to pay for the building and have to pay for time and people to help and so forth. You can also have moving meditation because you don't have to be physically still to be mentally still. The key is to be mentally still, meaning to calm down the thoughts. So yeah, and I don't know when the fall will be yet, but I'll put it up as soon as I can. Well, thanks everybody for participating tonight, and we'll catch you again next week. Let me double check and make sure that my calendar that I'm giving the right information. Nope, we skip a week. So we don't have class next week. We will have a class. There is a free class next week previewing the second module for this course, called "There's a Positive Purpose for Every Negative Emotion," which you can feel free to attend and tell other people about. And then the next class will be in 2 weeks on the 26th. All right. Good night.